At my daughter's wedding, her fiancé pulled out a chair as I was sitting down, and I fell to the floor amid the laughter of the guests. Your place is on the floor, he said mockingly, humiliating me in front of everyone. But suddenly, the groom's father stood up, looked at me in shock, and whispered, Sir, is that you? That moment changed everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The screech of brakes cut through the winter evening as tires skidded against asphalt. A car door slammed shut with enough force to rattle the garage windows. I dropped my wrench, oil splattering across the concrete floor, as Vivian burst through the side door. Dad, you won't believe... She stopped mid-sentence, bouncing on her toes like she used to when she was 7, and had a secret burning inside her chest. I wiped my hands on the oil-stained rag, squinting against the harsh fluorescent light. The vintage Harley I'd been rebuilding sat half-assembled, engine parts scattered across my workbench like mechanical confetti. Winter air seeped through the gaps around the door, mixing the smell of motor oil with the crisp January night. What's got you so worked up, sweetheart? I straightened my back, feeling the familiar ache from hours bent over the engine. Her eyes sparkled brighter than the engagement ring catching the garage light. The diamond was bigger than anything I could have afforded on a mechanic's salary. She thrust her phone toward me, nearly vibrating with excitement. Jasper proposed. Look, Dad, look at this video. I set down the rag and took her phone carefully, my calloused fingers leaving smudges on the screen. The video showed a restaurant I'd never been able to afford. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, servers in pressed uniforms. Jasper knelt beside a table, his expensive suit perfectly tailored, a Rolex glinting on his wrist as he presented the ring box. He said we're getting married in April. Vivian rushed on, her words tumbling over each other. You'll be so happy for me, Dad. He's everything I've dreamed of. I watched the video again, noting how Jasper barely looked at the young waitress who refilled their water glasses. His gesture was dismissive, almost irritated by the interruption. In the background, I caught his voice saying something to someone off camera, the tone condescending though I couldn't make out the words. Of course I'm happy for you, Princess. I handed back the phone, forcing a smile. When do I get to meet his parents? Vivian's nervous laughter echoed against the garage walls. Oh, they're traveling in Europe for 2 months, but they'll be back just before the wedding. Jasper says we don't need to wait for them to plan everything. Traffic hummed from the Brooklyn street beyond the garage door. Somewhere down the block, neighbors called goodnight to each other, their voices carrying on the cold air. I picked up another wrench, needing something to do with my hands. That's quite a timeline, I said, keeping my voice neutral. April's not very far away. I know. She spun around, arms outstretched like she was embracing the whole world. Jasper says when you know, you know. He doesn't believe in wasting time with long engagements. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the tools scattered on my workbench. I glanced at the video one more time as Vivian held the phone, watching Jasper's face. Something about his expression when he thought no one was looking made my chest tighten. Show me that ring again, I said, stepping closer. She extended her hand, and I studied the diamond carefully. It was flawless, expensive, the kind of ring meant to impress rather than express love. The setting was modern, cold somehow, lacking the warmth of the simple band I'd given her mother 28 years ago. It's beautiful, Vivian. Really beautiful. Isn't it? He has such amazing taste. She pulled her hand back, admiring the way the stone caught the light. He wants to take you to dinner tomorrow night, so you two can get to know each other properly. I nodded, already thinking about the suit hanging in my closet, wondering if it would be nice enough for wherever Jasper had in mind. The oil stain on my work shirt seemed darker suddenly, more obvious under the bright garage lights. I'd like that, I said, though unease crawled up my spine like cold fingers. Just the 3 of us? Yes, his parents won't be back until right before the wedding. But that's perfect, actually. You'll have his full attention. She kissed my cheek, leaving behind the scent of her perfume mixed with the winter air still clinging to her coat. As she headed toward the door connecting the garage to the house, she paused. Dad, you're going to love him once you really get to know him. I promise. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me alone with the half-assembled motorcycle and the echo of her words. I picked up the wrench again, but my hands had started to shake slightly. The video played once more in my mind. Jasper's dismissive gesture, the rushed timeline, the absent parents. I closed the garage door and headed inside, but the cold feeling in my chest had nothing to do with the January night. 2 hours later, I sat at the desk in my small home office, staring at the computer screen that had taken forever to boot up. The photo of Maria smiled at me from its place beside the monitor, her wedding dress white as fresh snow, her eyes bright with the same joy I'd seen in Vivian's face tonight. I touched the gold chain around my neck where my wedding ring hung, hidden beneath my shirt. The metal was warm from my body heat, a constant reminder of promises made and kept. I need to know who this boy is, Maria, I whispered to the photograph. Help me protect our girl. Facebook loaded slowly on my old computer. I'd found Jasper's profile easily enough. Jasper Hale, financial analyst at Morrison & Associates. His profile picture showed him leaning against a red Ferrari, sunglasses reflecting the camera flash, his smile sharp as a knife edge. I scrolled through his posts, each one making my stomach tighten further. Finally found someone who appreciates the finer things. Moving Up posted 3 days ago with a photo of an expensive restaurant bill. Old generation just doesn't understand modern success, still living in the past while we're building the future. From last week, with dozens of likes from friends whose profiles showed similar attitudes. In the comments section of a friend's post about getting a promotion at a construction company, Jasper had written, "Congrats, I guess. Some people are content with ordinary lives, not me." Ambition matters. My hands clenched into fists as I read through more posts. Photo after photo of luxury cars, expensive watches, high-end restaurants. But it wasn't the money that bothered me. It was the attitude behind every caption, every comment. The way he looked down on people who worked with their hands, who built things, who served others. A post from December caught my attention. Upgrading my lifestyle one smart choice at a time. Sometimes you have to leave your past behind to step into your future. The comments were filled with encouragement from friends who seemed to share his values. One person had asked about his new girl, and Jasper had replied, "She's perfect, sweet, trusting, and her father's exactly the kind of simple man who won't complicate things." Simple man. The words hit me like a physical blow. I leaned back in my chair, the old springs creaking under my weight. Around me, the small office felt smaller suddenly. Family photos covered the walls. Vivian's graduation, her first apartment, birthday parties where she'd blown out candles, while I cheered from behind the camera. In every picture, it was just the two of us. No extended family. No safety net beyond what I could provide with my own 2 hands. The military commendations hung in a simple frame near the bookshelf, but I rarely looked at them anymore. That part of my life felt distant now, like it belonged to someone else. What mattered was the promise I'd made to Maria, the day Vivian was born. I would protect our daughter from anyone who might hurt her. I clicked through more of Jasper's photos. Him at charity events, but always positioned to show off his expensive suit rather than the cause. Pictures from work functions where he stood slightly apart from his colleagues, his body language suggesting he considered himself above their company. In one photo from a company retreat, he'd written, "Networking with the right people. It's not what you know, it's who you know and how to use them." Use them. The phrase made my skin crawl. The house was quiet around me, settling into the night with familiar creaks and sighs. Through the thin walls, I could hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door, watching her evening telenovela, the dramatic music drifting through the winter air. Normal sounds of a normal neighborhood where people looked out for each other and worked honest jobs. I thought about Vivian's face tonight, how radiant she'd looked, how completely she trusted this man. She'd inherited her mother's ability to see the best in people, to believe in love conquering all obstacles. It was one of the things I cherished most about her, and now it terrified me. My reflection stared back from the dark window, gray hair, weathered face, hands that showed decades of honest work. Everything Jasper seemed to despise about my generation. But those hands had held my daughter when she cried, had taught her to ride a bicycle, had worked extra shifts to pay for her college education. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness for a long moment. Tomorrow night I would meet Jasper face to face. I would look him in the eye and see if the man matched the arrogant voice in these posts. I would give him a chance to prove my suspicions wrong. But if he was what these posts suggested, if he saw my daughter as another acquisition, another step up his social ladder, then I would need to find a way to protect her without destroying her faith in love itself. The photograph of Maria seemed to nod in the dim light from the street lamp outside. I touched the wedding ring beneath my shirt one more time, drawing strength from the metal that had witnessed decades of devotion. Tomorrow, I would begin to learn what kind of man wanted to marry my daughter. I woke up the next morning with Jasper's social media posts still burning in my mind. Sleep had come in fragments, interrupted by dreams of Maria, warning me about men who saw love as a business transaction. The winter sun struggled through my bedroom curtains, casting weak light across the room where I'd raised Vivian alone for 26 years. The phone rang while I was spreading peanut butter on toast, my breakfast routine unchanged for decades. Vivian's voice bubbled through the speaker, still riding high on engagement euphoria. "Dad, good morning. Did you sleep well?" I couldn't sleep at all. I kept staring at my ring. "Morning, sweetheart. I'm glad you're happy." I set down the knife, focusing on keeping my voice steady. "So, about tonight. Jasper made reservations at the Golden Fork for 7:30. Do you know it? It's in Manhattan, near Central Park. He says it's one of the city's hidden gems." I knew the name from newspaper reviews I'd never had reason to read, the kind of place where appetizers cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. "Sounds fancy," I said, already wondering if my one good suit would be appropriate. "Oh, it is. Jasper has such refined taste. And Dad? His parents are still in Europe. They won't be back until just before the wedding. But that's perfect because tonight will be all about you two getting to know each other." 2 months in Europe. The kind of casual luxury that spoke of serious money. I thought about my own vacation time, saved up over years and spent on long weekends fixing the house or visiting historical sites with Vivian. "When did they leave?" I asked. "Right after Christmas. They're doing some kind of extended art tour. Florence, Paris, Vienna. Jasper says they travel for months at a time. Isn't that romantic? Or convenient," I thought, but kept it to myself. "Well, I'm looking forward to meeting your young man properly," I said. 7:30, you said? "Yes. And Dad? Dress nice, okay? Jasper really values making good first impressions." After she hung up, I stood in my small kitchen, looking around at the home I'd worked so hard to maintain. The refrigerator was covered with Vivian's artwork from elementary school, photos from her college graduation, memories of a life built on love rather than money. The morning light revealed every worn edge, every place where I'd chosen function over form because my budget demanded it. I spent the afternoon preparing like I was getting ready for an inspection. My one good suit, navy blue, purchased for Vivian's college graduation, hung from the closet door while I considered whether it would pass muster at the Golden Fork. The fabric was quality, but it was 5 years old and showed the careful mending I'd done on a small tear near the pocket. In the bathroom mirror, I studied my reflection with brutal honesty. 58 years old, hair more gray than brown, face marked by decades of outdoor work and the stress of single parenthood. My hands bore scars from years of mechanical work, calluses that spoke of honest labor. Not the manicured hands of a man who made his living with spreadsheets and market analysis. I shaved carefully, using the electric razor Vivian had given me last Christmas. She'd said it would give me a professional look, and I'd accepted it with amusement, knowing she worried about me in ways that reversed our traditional roles. The suit fit well enough, though it felt strange after months of work clothes and casual wear. I'd kept myself in good shape despite my age, but the formal clothing emphasized how rarely I had occasion to dress up these days. Most of my social life revolved around neighborhood barbecues and Vivian's birthday dinners, events where comfort mattered more than appearance. As I adjusted my tie, I thought about the questions I wanted to ask without seeming intrusive. How long had he known he wanted to marry Vivian? What were his long-term plans? Did he understand the kind of woman she was? Someone who valued loyalty and kindness over material success? But underneath the polite inquiries I was planning, darker questions lurked. Why the rush to marry? Why were his parents conveniently absent? And most importantly, did he love my daughter for who she was, or for what she represented to him? I found myself thinking strategically, the way I'd learned to assess situations during my military years. Read the terrain, identify potential threats, plan multiple approaches to the objective. The objective tonight was simple: understand what kind of man wanted to marry my daughter. The photograph on my dresser showed Vivian, at age 10, gap-toothed and grinning as she held up a fish we'd caught during a camping trip upstate. She'd insisted on baiting her own hook, refusing to let me do it for her. "I can do things myself, Dad," she'd said with characteristic determination. That independent spirit had served her well in college and in building her interior design career. But it also made her vulnerable to people who might mistake her kindness for naivety, her trust for weakness. I grabbed my keys and wallet, checking the address Vivian had texted me. The subway ride into Manhattan would give me time to compose myself, to prepare for whatever version of Jasper Hale I was about to meet. The confident man from the social media posts, or perhaps someone different in person, someone worthy of my daughter's love. Outside, the January air bit at my face as I locked the front door. Mrs. Rodriguez waved from her window, and I waved back, grateful for neighbors who'd watched out for Vivian and me over the years, the kind of community bonds that money couldn't buy. As I walked toward the subway station, I realized I was approaching this dinner the same way I'd once approached potentially dangerous situations overseas: alert, prepared, but hoping for the best outcome. Tonight, I would learn whether my daughter had chosen a partner or a predator. The taxi pulled away from the curb on Fifth Avenue, leaving me standing before the Golden Fork's imposing facade. Crystal chandeliers gleamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, and a doorman in white gloves gestured toward the entrance with practiced elegance. I adjusted my tie one final time, feeling the weight of every dollar this place would cost. Inside, marble floors reflected the soft glow of amber lighting. Other diners spoke in hushed tones, their clothing worth more than my monthly mortgage payment. The hostess, a young woman with perfect posture and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, looked me up and down with barely concealed assessment. "Rhea's party?" I said, keeping my voice steady. She led me through tables where men wore watches that caught the light like small suns, and women draped themselves in jewelry that sparkled with each gesture. I spotted Vivian immediately, her face lighting up as she waved enthusiastically from a corner booth. Beside her sat Jasper, checking his phone with the casual indifference of someone accustomed to keeping others waiting. "Dad!" Vivian stood as I approached, but Jasper remained seated until the last possible moment, rising slowly as if the effort inconvenienced him. "Mr. Reyes?" His handshake was limp, dismissive, lasting exactly long enough to avoid outright rudeness. "Vivian's told me so much about you." The way he said it suggested she'd told him too much for his comfort. "Likewise," I replied, settling into the chair across from them. "Congratulations on your engagement." Jasper's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Thank you. We're very excited about our future together." He signaled the waiter with an imperious gesture. "Wine selection tonight will be the 2008 Bordeaux, bottle service." No consultation, no question about preferences. The waiter nodded deferentially and disappeared. "So, Mr. Reyes." Jasper leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled like a man conducting an interview. "Vivian tells me you work with your hands. That must be satisfying." The pause before satisfying carried volumes. "I'm a mechanic," I said simply. "I fix things that are broken." "How refreshingly honest." His laugh had sharp edges. "I'm in financial services myself. Portfolio management, high-stakes investments. Different world entirely, I suppose." Vivian reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Dad rebuilt his motorcycle completely from scratch. It's beautiful. A vintage Harley from the 70s. "Motorcycles." Jasper checked his Rolex ostentatiously. "Dangerous hobby for someone your age, wouldn't you say? Though I suppose different generations have different ideas about appropriate risks." The wine arrived, and Jasper performed an elaborate tasting ritual, while the sommelier waited. He nodded approvals, as if bestowing a great favor, then gestured for our glasses to be filled, without asking if we even wanted wine. "Vivian's been telling me about your quaint neighborhood in Brooklyn," he continued, swirling his glass. So authentic. Very working class. I imagine the sense of community must compensate for other limitations. What limitations? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Jasper's smile widened. Oh, nothing specific. Just that once you've experienced certain standards of living, it becomes difficult to appreciate simpler pleasures. But that's generational, I think. Your generation values different things. My generation, the condescension dripped like honey from a broken jar. Such as? I asked. Traditional values, I suppose. Hard work for its own sake rather than working smart. Loyalty to outdated concepts rather than adapting to modern realities. He gestured around the restaurant. Places like this, for instance. Your generation might see it as wasteful extravagance, while we see it as investment in experiences that matter. Vivian shifted uncomfortably. Jasper, Dad appreciates nice things too. Of course he does, Jasper interrupted smoothly. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise. It's just different perspectives on value and success. He turned back to me. Tell me, Mr. Reyes, what do you consider your greatest achievement? The question was a trap, beautifully constructed. Answer with pride, and he'd find a way to diminish it. Answer with humility, and he'd interpret it as proof of limited ambition. Raising Vivian, I said. Admirable, he nodded, but his eyes held calculation. Single parenthood must have been challenging. Limited resources, I imagine. No wonder Vivian appreciates having someone who can provide properly for her future. The words hit like physical blows, each one precisely aimed. Vivian's face flushed red. Jasper, please. What? I'm simply acknowledging your father's sacrifices, and now that I'm in the picture, those days of struggle are over. Vivian deserves the finer things in life, don't you think, Mr. Reyes? I gripped my napkin until my knuckles went white. Around us, crystal clinked against china, creating a soundtrack of wealth and privilege that suddenly felt suffocating. The waiter approached with menus, but Jasper waved him away. Actually, I think we're ready for the check. The waiter returned with a leather folder, placing it beside Jasper's elbow with practiced discretion. Through the crystal and candlelight, I watched my daughter's fiancé examine the bill with theatrical attention, his eyebrows rising in mock surprise. Well now, he said, sliding the check across the white tablecloth toward me with deliberate slowness. I believe tradition dictates that the bride's father handles dinner. The number on the bill made my stomach drop. $347. More than I spent on groceries in a month. Jasper, that's not necessary. Vivian started, her voice strained. Nonsense, sweetheart. He waved her objection away without looking at her, his eyes fixed on my face like a predator watching prey. Your father wants to show his support for our engagement. Don't you, Mr. Reyes? The silence stretched between us like a wire under tension. Other diners continued their conversations, oblivious to the slow-motion disaster unfolding at our corner table. A woman at the next table laughed at something her companion said, the sound bright and careless in the amber-lit atmosphere. Of course, Jasper continued, leaning back in his chair with satisfaction. Your generation probably doesn't understand modern courtesies. In my circle, this is simply how things are done. My hands trembled as I reached for my wallet. The leather was worn smooth from years of use, a working man's wallet that had never carried the kind of money this restaurant expected. I could feel Vivian watching me, her face pale in the candlelight. Dad, please, I can... No. I placed my credit card on the check, praying the transaction would go through. It's fine, Princess. Jasper's smile was triumphant. Excellent. I do appreciate a man who understands proper protocol. He checked his phone again, scrolling through messages as if the moment of my humiliation was already forgotten. You know, Mr. Reyes, Vivian was worried you might not approve of our relationship. I told her mature adults always find ways to get along. The word mature landed like a slap. Around us, the restaurant hummed with quiet prosperity. The clink of expensive silverware, the whisper of designer fabrics, the soft laughter of people who belonged in places like this. I had never felt more like an outsider. I simply believe in treating people with respect, I said carefully. Respect? Jasper looked up from his phone, eyebrows raised in apparent confusion. I thought I was being quite respectful. After all, I'm allowing you to maintain traditional customs. Some men in my position might insist on modern arrangements, but I understand the importance of letting older generations feel useful. Vivian's wine glass trembled in her hand. Jasper, please stop. Stop what, darling? I'm simply having a conversation with your father. His tone was innocent, but his eyes glittered with malicious amusement. Unless he's uncomfortable with honest discussion about our different backgrounds. The waiter returned with my credit card and a receipt. I signed it with a hand that shook slightly, the tip amount painful but necessary to maintain dignity in front of the staff. $362 total, nearly a week's wages. There we are, Jasper said brightly, as if he'd done me a favor. Nothing like a good meal to bring family together, though I suppose this is quite a step up from your usual dining experiences, Mr. Reyes. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden quiet that had fallen over our table. Vivian looked up at me with eyes that held growing horror and understanding. Thank you for dinner, Jasper continued, still seated, still smiling. I'm sure Vivian will appreciate seeing how well her two favorite men get along. The casual cruelty of it, the way he'd orchestrated my humiliation while positioning himself as gracious, took my breath away. This wasn't nervousness or social awkwardness. This was deliberate character assassination performed with surgical precision in front of my daughter. Dad, Vivian whispered, standing as well. Her engagement ring caught the candlelight, throwing sparkles across the tablecloth like scattered stars. I looked down at Jasper, still lounging in his chair with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. His expensive suit, his perfect hair, his smug expression, everything about him screamed privilege and entitlement. Vivian, I said quietly, I think we need to talk. I touched Vivian's elbow gently, guiding her away from the table toward a quieter alcove near the restaurant's entrance. Behind us, Jasper remained seated, already absorbed in his phone as if the evening's events were simply another successful business transaction. The alcove was dimly lit, designed for intimate conversations and private moments. Through the amber glass, I could see the busy Manhattan street beyond, normal people living normal lives, unaware of the small drama playing out behind crystal and marble. Dad, Vivian started, then stopped, her hands twisting together in her lap. Princess, I kept my voice gentle, though my chest still burned with suppressed anger. I need you to really think about how he treated both of us tonight. She stared at the table between us, her engagement ring catching the soft light. Maybe he was just nervous. First impressions are hard, and he knows how important you are to me. Was that nervousness? I asked quietly. The way he spoke about our neighborhood, the way he made me pay while acting like he was doing me a favor. Her face flushed, but she still wouldn't meet my eyes. He's used to a different world, Dad. Different customs. Maybe it just seemed normal to him. Vivian, look at me. She raised her head reluctantly, and I saw my little girl again, the child who used to crawl into my lap when the world felt too big and confusing. A man who truly loves you would never deliberately humiliate your father, I said. He wouldn't mock the neighborhood where you grew up or dismiss the work that put food on your table. But I love him, she whispered, and the words sounded like a plea. And he says he loves me. I believe you love him. But, honey, love isn't enough if it's not returned the same way. I reached across the table, covering her hands with mine. I've seen his type before. They start with small disrespects and build from there. Tonight was a test, to see how much I'd take, how much you'd excuse. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at our joined hands. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. I saw how he looked at you. That wasn't nervousness, was it? No, sweetheart, it wasn't. He's never talked to me that way, she said quickly, as if defending him could make the evening's events disappear. He's always been sweet and attentive. I'm sure he has been. You're beautiful, successful, kind. Everything a man like him wants to acquire. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. But acquisition isn't love, Vivian. Love means cherishing what someone values, not dismissing it. Tears gathered in her eyes. What if you're right? What if I've made a terrible mistake? The question broke my heart. I thought of all the times I'd watched her struggle with decisions, wanting to shelter her from every disappointment, but knowing she needed to learn to trust her own judgment. Then you figure out what to do next, I said simply. And you remember that whatever happens, you're not alone. You have people who love you for exactly who you are, people who would never ask you to be ashamed of where you come from. She wiped her eyes with the cloth napkin, leaving small dark spots on the expensive fabric. I thought I was so smart, so independent. How did I not see this? Because you have a good heart, and you believe the best in people. Don't ever let anyone make you think that's a weakness. I squeezed her hands. You deserve someone who honors what you value, not someone who sees your love as a step up his social ladder. Through the alcove's glass partition, I could see Jasper still at our table, now speaking animatedly on his phone. His body language was relaxed, confident, a man who believed he'd won an important victory. I keep thinking about the way he talked about our neighborhood, Vivian said slowly, like it was something embarrassing instead of home. Your mother and I chose that neighborhood because it was full of good people who looked out for each other. You grew up surrounded by teachers and firefighters and shop owners who knew your name and watched you grow up. That's not something to be ashamed of. I know, she said, but her voice was uncertain. Do you? Because the way he talked tonight, you'd think honest work was something to be hidden, like the hands that built your treehouse and taught you to change a tire were somehow shameful. She looked back toward Jasper, who had finished his call and was now checking his watch with obvious impatience. He's probably wondering what's taking so long. Let him wonder. I kept my voice steady, though part of me wanted to march back to that table and explain a few things about respect. This conversation is about you, not him. What should I do, Dad? The question I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. I thought of Maria, of the advice she would have given our daughter in this moment. Only you can decide that, Princess. But whatever you choose, I'll be here. And if you ever need a safe place to land, our door's always open. She nodded, fresh tears spilling over. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart, more than you'll ever know. She stood up slowly, straightening her dress and composing herself. I should go back. He'll want to leave soon. I stood as well, fighting the urge to pull her into my arms and carry her home like I had when she was small, and the world had hurt her feelings. Just remember what we talked about, okay? And trust your instincts. They're better than you think. We walked back toward the main dining room together, her hand resting lightly on my arm. The taxi pulled away from the Golden Fork as Manhattan's glittering facade began to fade behind us. I slumped against the worn vinyl seat, feeling every one of my 58 years settling into my bones like winter cold. The driver's radio played soft jazz, a stark contrast to the symphony of car horns and sirens that formed the city's eternal soundtrack. Through the fogged window, I watched the transformation unfold, towering glass monuments giving way to older brick buildings, designer storefronts replaced by corner bodegas and laundromats. The people on the sidewalks changed too, from power suits and designer heels to work clothes and practical shoes. My world, the world Jasper had spent the evening mocking. My hand found the gold chain beneath my shirt, fingers closing around the warm metal of Maria's wedding ring. 28 years since I'd slipped it onto her finger, 18 since I'd taken it off for the last time. The promise I'd made at her bedside echoed in the taxi's quiet space. Take care of our girl, Gus. Keep her safe from anyone who'd hurt her. I thought I understood what that meant then. Scraped knees and teenage heartbreak, maybe some college boy who didn't appreciate her worth. I never imagined someone like Jasper, who could slice her self-worth into ribbons while smiling and calling it love. The Brooklyn Bridge stretched ahead, its cables catching the reflection of streetlights like a web of silver threads. Below, the East River flowed dark and endless toward the harbor where I'd first set foot in New York 40 years ago, fresh out of the service with nothing but hope and determination. What would you do, sweetheart? I whispered to the window, watching Maria's face form in the condensation. How do I protect her without losing her? But I knew what she'd say. Maria had never tolerated bullies, whether they wore expensive suits or torn jeans. When Vivian was 8 and Tommy Morrison kept pulling her braids at school, Maria had marched down to that playground and given Tommy a lecture about respect that left him wide-eyed and apologetic. Not through threats or intimidation, but through the simple, devastating power of moral authority. The taxi turned off the bridge into familiar territory. Brownstone apartments with fire escapes zigzagging down their faces, small front yards where people grew tomatoes and roses in equal measure. Mrs. Rodriguez's window glowed warm yellow, her evening telenovela providing soundtrack to the neighborhood's settling rhythm. I thought about Vivian's face in that quiet alcove, the way her certainty had cracked when I'd asked her to really look at Jasper's behavior. She was starting to see it, the condescension disguised as charm, the control masquerading as care. But seeing and accepting were different things, especially when your heart was invested in a different story. My chest tightened as I replayed the evening's humiliations, the way Jasper had dismissed our neighborhood as quaint, as if the place where I'd raised my daughter was some kind of museum exhibit. The calculated cruelty of sliding that check across the table, knowing exactly what it would cost me, knowing I'd pay it anyway for Vivian's sake. But it was more than money. It was the message behind it, that I was old, weak, irrelevant, that my values were outdated, my work meaningless, my love for my daughter nothing more than an obstacle to be circumvented. "You're wrong about that, boy," I said to the passing streetlights. "Dead wrong." The taxi slowed, turning onto my street, where the trees were just beginning to show the first hints of spring buds. Porch lights created pools of welcome warmth, and I could see Mr. Fox across the street putting out his garbage for tomorrow's collection. Normal people living normal lives, building something solid with their hands and hearts. I'd spent 30 years in this neighborhood, watching children grow up and move away, helping neighbors through divorces and job losses and family celebrations. These were the people Jasper saw as beneath him, teachers and mechanics and shop owners who measured their worth in relationships rather than bank accounts. The wedding ring pressed against my chest as the taxi pulled up to my house. Through the front window I could see the living room where I'd taught Vivian to tie her shoes, where we'd watched Saturday morning cartoons and built blanket forts that covered half the furniture, where Maria and I had planned our future, and where I'd raised our daughter alone when that future was cut short. "I promised you I'd keep her safe," I said to the empty seat beside me. "That boy is dangerous, Maria. Not with fists or weapons, but with something worse. He wants to own her, not love her." The meter clicked off, and I handed the driver cash with a tip that would help him get home to his own family. As he pulled away, I stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the house that had sheltered 3 generations of honest living. Tomorrow, I would call Vivian. We'd talk, really talk, about what she'd seen tonight and what it meant for her future. I wouldn't try to control her choice, but I'd make sure she understood what choice she was making. And if Jasper decided to escalate this war, he'd start it. Well, he'd learn that underestimating a man based on his work clothes was a mistake that carried consequences. I climbed the front steps slowly, key turning in the lock of the door that had always been open to anyone who needed shelter or wisdom, or just a hot meal and someone to listen. Inside, the house waited quietly, filled with memories and the promise of whatever came next. 6 weeks had passed since that disastrous dinner, 6 weeks of tense phone calls and careful conversations. Vivian had been asking questions about respect, about relationships, about the difference between love and possession. Each conversation made Jasper more agitated, more desperate to regain control. The sound of an expensive engine cut through the quiet Brooklyn evening, followed by a car door slamming with unnecessary force. Through my front window, I watched Jasper stride up the walkway, his expensive coat whipping behind him like a battle flag. He didn't knock, he pounded. I opened the door to find him standing on my porch, his usual polished veneer cracked and ugly. Without invitation, he pushed past me into the living room, his eyes taking in the modest furniture and family photos with unconcealed disdain. "We need to talk," he said, spinning to face me. "Now." I closed the door deliberately, keeping it unlocked. "About what?" "Don't play dumb with me." His voice was sharp, aggressive. "Vivian's been different since that dinner. She's asking questions, having doubts. I know you've been poisoning her mind against me." "Have I?" I kept my tone level, watching him pace like a caged animal in my living room. "What exactly do you think I told her?" "You told her I was disrespectful, that I don't value family." He stopped pacing, his hands clenched at his sides. "You made her question everything about our relationship." "I told her what I observed. Nothing more, nothing less." His laugh was harsh, brittle. "Right. The concerned father act. Very touching. He stepped closer, using his height to try to intimidate. But here's what you're going to do. You're going to call her tomorrow and apologize. Tell her you were wrong about me, that you overreacted. Or what? The question hung in the air between us. Jasper's face flushed red, and for a moment the mask slipped completely away. Or you'll find out what it's like to lose access to your daughter permanently. I studied his face, the entitled rage, the desperation beneath the bluster. This was a man who'd never been told no, never faced real resistance. In his world, money and status solved every problem, bought every compliance. "Young man," I said quietly, "I think you're forgetting yourself." "Am I?" He pulled out his phone, waving it like a weapon. "One call to Vivian right now. I tell her you threaten me, that you're trying to break us up out of jealousy. Who do you think she'll believe? Her loving fiancé? Or her bitter, lonely father? Is that really how you want to play this?" Something in my tone made him hesitate. For the first time since he'd barged through my door, uncertainty flickered across his face. I stood perfectly still, hands relaxed at my sides, but something about my posture made him take a half step back. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "I've worked too hard to get where I am. I won't let some old mechanic ruin everything I've built." "And what exactly have you built?" "Success, money, a future." He gestured wildly around my modest living room. "Things you wouldn't understand. Real achievement, not just this?" "This," I said, indicating the photos of Vivian's childhood on the mantelpiece, "is a daughter who knows she's loved unconditionally. This is 26 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees and homework help. This is what actual achievement looks like." "Sentimental garbage?" But his voice had lost some of its edge. "The world doesn't run on bedtime stories, old man. It runs on power and money, and knowing how to use both." "Maybe your world does." I moved slightly, not threatening, but positioning myself between him and the deeper parts of my house. "But Vivian comes from a different world, one where character matters more than bank accounts." He was sweating now, despite the cool evening, his expensive shirt starting to stick to his skin. "She'll choose me. When it comes down to it, she'll choose the life I can give her over whatever this represents." "Will she?" I asked mildly. Because from what I've seen lately, she's starting to understand the difference between being provided for and being valued. For a moment, I thought he might actually swing at me, his whole body tensed, hands curling into fists. But something, maybe the way I stood perfectly calm, maybe some instinct that warned him he was out of his depth, made him check himself. "This isn't over," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "Vivian's mine. She chose me, not this, not you. Vivian's not property, son. She doesn't belong to anyone." He headed for the door, then turned back one more time. "You have no idea who you're dealing with?" "Actually," I said quietly, "I think I have a pretty good idea." After he left, I stood in my living room listening to his car roar away into the night. Through the walls, I could hear Mrs. Rodriguez's television, the Johnsons' dog barking at something in their yard, normal sounds from normal people living normal lives. But nothing about this felt normal anymore. I picked up the phone to call Vivian, then set it down again. This conversation needed to happen face to face. The next afternoon, I stood outside Vivian's Manhattan apartment building, a small bouquet of daisies, her mother's favorite flowers, clutched in my weathered hands. The doorman recognized me from previous visits, nodding respectfully as he announced my arrival. "Send him up," came Vivian's voice through the intercom, warm but cautious. The elevator ride to the 15th floor gave me time to organize my thoughts. How do you tell your daughter that her fiancé came to your house making threats? How do you balance honesty with the need to let her make her own choices? She opened the door before I could knock, and I was struck by how tired she looked. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usual bright smile seemed forced. "Dad," she stepped aside to let me enter. "What brings you here?" "These are for you." I offered the daisies, watching her face soften as she recognized the significance, and I wanted to talk. Her apartment was beautiful, all clean lines and carefully chosen colors that reflected her design talent. But I noticed how sterile it felt compared to our family home, how the expensive furniture created distance rather than intimacy. "Let me put these in water," she said, disappearing into the kitchen. "Coffee?" That would be nice, Princess. When she returned with 2 steaming mugs, we settled on her modern sofa. Beautiful, but not particularly comfortable. She tucked her legs beneath her like she used to as a child, and for a moment I saw my little girl again. I want you to know, I began carefully, that whatever happens between you and Jasper, I love you completely. Your happiness is the most important thing to me. She nodded, but her eyes were wary. But I also need you to know that Jasper came to see me last night. Her coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. He what? He was angry, said you'd been asking questions, having doubts. He wanted me to call you and apologize, tell you I was wrong about him. I kept my voice steady, factual. When I refused, he made some threats about cutting off my access to you. Vivian set down her mug with shaking hands. I can't believe I knew he was upset about things, but to go to your house? How did he act when he came home last night? She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. Agitated, angry. He said he'd had a difficult day at work, but now that I think about it... She looked up at me with growing horror. Dad, I'm so sorry. I never thought he would... You have nothing to apologize for. I leaned forward, covering her hands with mine. But I am worried about you. The way he spoke about you last night, like you were something he owned rather than someone he loved. Tears gathered in her eyes. I've been thinking about what you said at the restaurant, about respect and how people treat what you value. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. He's never talked about our neighborhood the way he did that night. Never made me feel ashamed of where I came from. And how do you feel about that? Confused, hurt. She pulled her hands free, wrapping her arms around herself. I love him, Dad. I really do. But the man I fell in love with wouldn't threaten my father, wouldn't try to cut me off from my family. People don't usually start with the big controlling behaviors, I said gently. They start small, criticizing your friends, making you feel guilty for spending time with family, making you question your own judgment. She was nodding, tears flowing freely now. He has been doing that. Little comments about my choices, about how I should dress for his work functions, about how my friends aren't sophisticated enough. She looked at me with dawning realization. How did I not see it? Because you loved him. Because you wanted to believe the best. I moved closer, wrapping my arms around her like I had when she was small and the world felt too big and confusing. That's not a weakness, sweetheart. That's who you are. Someone who believes in people, who sees their potential. But what if I'm making a mistake? What if I'm throwing away something good because I'm scared? I thought about Maria, about the promise I'd made to protect our daughter from anyone who would hurt her. But protection sometimes meant stepping back, letting her find her own strength. Only you can answer that, I said. But I can tell you this. A man who truly loves you would never try to separate you from the people who matter to you. Love doesn't make demands like that. She cried quietly against my shoulder, while afternoon light streamed through her windows, illuminating the expensive furniture and designer accessories that suddenly seemed less important than the simple act of a father comforting his daughter. I don't know what to do, she whispered. You don't have to decide everything today. But remember, whatever you choose, I'll be here. Our door is always open, and our love for you never changes. She pulled back to look at me, her eyes red but clearer than they'd been in weeks. I love you too, Dad. So much. I know, Princess. I know. We sat together as the afternoon light faded, father and daughter rebuilt on the foundation of honesty and unconditional love. Whatever came next, we would face it together. April sunshine filtered through the flowering trees of eternal gardens, casting dappled shadows across white chairs arranged in perfect rows. I stood at the edge of the reception area, tugging at my jacket, the same navy suit from Vivian's college graduation, now feeling inadequate among the sea of designer formal wear. Guests mingled in clusters, champagne glasses catching the afternoon light like scattered diamonds. I recognized none of them beyond a few of Vivian's college friends, who offered polite waves from across the lawn. Everyone else belonged to Jasper's world. Sleek haircuts, expensive watches, conversations about stock portfolios and European vacations. The ceremony had been beautiful. Vivian glowed in her mother's altered wedding dress. The lace Maria had chosen 40 years ago transformed into something that honored both past and present. When the minister asked who gave this woman, I'd stood with pride despite the knot in my stomach, knowing what reception likely held in store. "Excuse me, sir," a young man with a camera approached. "Could you step aside? We're trying to get family photos." I moved back, watching Jasper pose with his groomsmen, his smile razor sharp as he spotted me retreating. This was his domain now, his rules. Every gesture reminded me that I was here on sufferance, a necessary inconvenience to be managed and minimized. "Dad!" Vivian appeared at my elbow, radiant despite the tension I could see in her eyes. "Come meet Jasper's college friends." But as we approached the group, Jasper materialized with practiced smoothness. "Sweetheart, the photographer needs you for a few more shots. Your father can introduce himself." She hesitated, glancing between us. "But I wanted—" "Trust me, we'll have plenty of time for mixing later." His hand on her waist was possessive, steering her away before she could protest further. Left alone among strangers, I wandered toward the reception tables, reading place cards until I found my name. Table 12, far from the wedding party, sandwiched between Vivian's elderly great-aunt and a couple I didn't recognize. The message was clear: family, but barely. "You must be Vivian's father." A woman in pearls extended her manicured hand. "I'm Caroline, Jasper's colleague. He's told us so much about you." The way she said it suggested the stories hadn't been flattering. "All good things, I hope." I kept my voice neutral. Her laugh was like wind chimes in a storm. "Oh, you know how Jasper is. So clever with his observations about people." Around us, the reception began to flow like choreographed theater. Waiters glided between tables with silver trays, wine glasses refilled before they emptied, conversations humming with the easy confidence of money talking to money. I found my assigned seat and greeted my table mates, Aunt Ruth, who squeezed my hand with genuine warmth, and the Hendersons, nice people who'd known Vivian since childhood. For a moment, surrounded by actual family and friends, I allowed myself to relax. That's when I saw Jasper approaching, his predator's smile firmly in place. "Mr. Reyes, how are you finding everything? Up to your standards?" The question carried barbs wrapped in silk. Around the table, conversation quieted as people sensed the undercurrent. "Everything's beautiful," I replied carefully. "You and Vivian have done a wonderful job." "Well, Vivian had very specific ideas about elegance. I think we've achieved something quite sophisticated." He paused, letting his eyes sweep the lavish surroundings. "Though I suppose this is all quite different from what you're used to." Aunt Ruth's fingers tightened on her napkin. The Hendersons exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Different can be good," I said. "Oh, absolutely. Variety is the spice of life." Jasper moved behind my chair as I prepared to sit down for the dinner service. "I was just telling some colleagues earlier about the diverse backgrounds represented here today. Really fascinating sociology." I began to lower myself into the chair, one hand on each armrest, when I felt the sharp pull. The chair jerked backward just as my weight committed to sitting, sending me crashing ungracefully to the polished floor. The impact knocked the wind from my lungs. My jacket tore at the shoulder seam. Around me, conversation died as heads turned toward the sound. "Oops," Jasper said, his voice carrying clearly across the sudden quiet. "Looks like someone's getting a bit unsteady on their feet. Age catches up to all of us eventually." But his eyes blazed with triumph, and in that moment, his mask slipped completely. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable closer to ground level anyway. Your place is on the floor." Gasps rippled through nearby tables. Aunt Ruth half rose from her seat, horror written across her weathered features. The Hendersons stared in shock at behavior that violated every principle of basic decency. From across the reception area, I heard Vivian's cry of distress as she spotted me on the ground, her bouquet falling forgotten as she rushed toward the scene. I lay there for a heartbeat, feeling every one of my 58 years, surrounded by the silence of 100 people who'd just witnessed deliberate cruelty disguised as accident. Through the flowering trees, spring sunshine continued to dapple the reception tables with cheerful light, indifferent to the ugly moment playing out beneath. Behind me, I heard the rustle of expensive fabric and caught a familiar voice saying, "Nancy, hurry, we're already so late." The late arrivals entered through the garden's main archway, a distinguished couple still showing signs of hasty travel. The man moved with unmistakable military bearing despite his civilian clothes, scanning the reception with practiced eyes that took in everything: the uncomfortable silence, the scattered guests, and the man being helped from the ground. "Sol, there you are!" A woman near the entrance waved relief. "We were so worried about the flight delay." But Sol Hale had stopped moving entirely, his attention locked on the figure struggling to stand with his daughter's assistance. Something about the way the older man held his shoulders, even in distress, triggered a memory buried deep in combat-trained reflexes. "It can't be," he whispered, leaving his wife Nancy's side without explanation. I was dusting off my torn jacket when I heard boots crossing the reception area, with purpose. Military boots, though the man wore dress shoes, the sound of someone who'd spent decades learning to move with authority and intention. "Sir?" The voice cut through the murmur of uncomfortable guests. "Sir, is that really you?" I looked up from straightening my tie to find a face I hadn't seen in 20 years, aged but unmistakable. Gray now touched his temples. Lines marked his features, but the eyes held the same steady intelligence I remembered from desert bivouacs and midnight patrols. "Saul?" The name escaped before I could stop it. "Soldier Hale?" His face transformed with recognition and something deeper, the bone-deep gratitude of a man whose life had been saved and never forgotten. "Sergeant Reyes, I can't believe... What are you doing here?" Around us, guests leaned closer, sensing drama but not understanding its source. Jasper stood frozen, his triumph curdling into confusion as his father approached the man he'd just humiliated. "This is my daughter's wedding," I said quietly, glancing toward Vivian, who watched our reunion with growing amazement. Sol's eyes widened as the impossible coincidence registered. His gaze swung to Jasper, then back to me, processing implications that would reshape everything he thought he knew about this day. "Your daughter," he began, then stopped, as understanding hit him like artillery fire. His voice rose, carrying across the reception with the projection of a man trained to address troops in combat zones. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need everyone to understand something." The authority in his tone commanded immediate attention. Conversations ceased. Waiters paused mid-service. Even the string quartet lowered their instruments. "This man," Sewell continued, his hand falling on my shoulder with reverence, "is Sergeant Gus Reyes, United States Army. In April 2003, Forward Operating Base Charlie in Iraq, insurgents overran our position during a night patrol." Nancy appeared at his side, recognizing the story she'd heard countless times, but never expecting to meet its hero. Her eyes filled with understanding as she looked between her husband and the man who'd saved him. "I was wounded, trapped under enemy fire." Saul's voice carried emotion that 20 years hadn't diminished. "This man, this hero, risked his life to pull me to safety. He carried me 300 yards through active gunfire to the evacuation point." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward me with new awareness, recontextualizing everything they'd witnessed. The man on the ground wasn't some working-class embarrassment. He was a decorated veteran who'd earned his honor in blood and courage. "I recommended him for the Silver Star," Sol continued, his voice thick with pride and emotion. "For valor under fire, for saving the life of a fellow soldier when any reasonable person would have sought cover." Jasper's face had gone white as desert sand. His mouth worked soundlessly as the magnitude of his miscalculation became clear. The simple mechanic he'd been tormenting was a war hero, decorated for the kind of courage Jasper couldn't imagine possessing. "He never told me," Vivian whispered, but her voice carried in the stunned silence. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked at me with new eyes. "Dad, you never said anything about—" "I just did my job, Sewell," I interrupted, uncomfortable with the attention. "Any soldier would have done the same thing." "No, sir, not any soldier." Sewell's voice cracked with emotion. "You saved my life so I could come home to Nancy, so I could see my son grow up, so I could walk him down this very aisle today." He turned toward Jasper, whose face now showed horror at the recognition of what he'd done. "This man is the reason I have a family," Sewell declared to the silent crowd. "He's a genuine American hero, and if I just witnessed someone treating him with anything less than complete respect—" His eyes found Jasper's, carrying a father's disappointment that cut deeper than any shouting could. The reception area buzzed with whispered conversations as guests processed the revelation. Wine glasses sat forgotten on tables as people stared at the torn-jacketed man who'd carried their host's father to safety under enemy fire. From her position beside me, Vivian reached for my hand, squeezing it with fierce pride and love. "Welcome home, Sergeant," Soul said formally, snapping to attention in his dress clothes, a soldier honoring his commander one final time. The silence stretched like held breath until Jasper stepped forward, his face ashen but resolute. The confident predator who'd orchestrated my humiliation had vanished, replaced by a young man confronting the wreckage of his own character. His voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again, moving toward the microphone the band had been using for announcements. "I need to address everyone here." Guests shifted uncomfortably as he adjusted the microphone with trembling hands. Vivian moved closer to me, her grip on my arm tight with apprehension. What happened here tonight, what I did, was inexcusable. His words carried across the reception area, amplified for everyone to hear. "I've spent months treating this man with disrespect and contempt, and I just learned why that makes me not just wrong, but despicable." Nancy Hale pressed her hands to her mouth, recognizing her son's anguish. Soul stood rigid, waiting to see if the boy he'd raised could find the courage to make things right. "My father just told you that Sergeant Reyes saved his life in Iraq." Jasper's voice gained strength as he forced himself to continue. "What he didn't tell you is that for the past few months, I've been treating this war hero like he was beneath me. Because he's a mechanic. Because he lives in Brooklyn instead of Manhattan. Because I was too insecure and stupid to see past my own prejudices." A woman at table 6 whispered something to her companion. I caught fragments. Pulled the chair, deliberately humiliated. I made fun of his neighborhood, his work, his values. I forced him to pay for an expensive dinner just to watch him struggle with the bill. Jasper's confession grew more painful with each admission. Tonight, I pulled his chair away and watched him fall, then told him his place was on the floor. Gasps echoed across the reception. Several guests looked toward me with expressions ranging from sympathy to outrage. The photographer, still holding his camera, seemed unsure whether to document this unprecedented breakdown of wedding protocol. "And why did I do all this?" Jasper continued, his voice raw with self-recrimination. "Because I was afraid. Afraid I'd never measure up to my father's service. Afraid that Vivian would see I'm not half the man either of them is. So I tried to tear down someone who deserved only honor and respect." He turned directly toward me, abandoning the microphone to speak from his heart. "Mr. Reyes, Sergeant Reyes, I am profoundly sorry. You saved my father's life, and I repaid that debt by trying to humiliate you in front of your daughter. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm asking for the chance to earn it." The reception area had gone completely still. Even the catering staff had stopped moving, transfixed by the public dismantling of a man's pride in service of his conscience. "I want to learn from your example," he continued, his voice breaking. "I want to become the kind of man who deserves to be part of your family, the kind of man who protects and honors what matters, instead of attacking it out of fear." Tears streamed down Vivian's face as she watched her new husband strip away every pretense, every defense, laying his flaws bare before God and everyone. Nancy had moved to Saul's side, both parents watching their son with a mixture of heartbreak and hope. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of Maria's ring against my chest and the promise I'd made to protect our daughter. But protection sometimes meant teaching others how to love her properly. "Son," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silence, "it takes more courage to admit mistakes publicly than it does to make them privately. What matters now isn't what you did. It's what you choose to do going forward." Relief flooded his features as I extended my hand, then pulled him into the embrace his apology had earned. Family means supporting each other through everything, the good times and the times when we fall short of who we want to be. "Welcome to our family," I said quietly for his ears alone, "and thank you for loving my daughter enough to become worthy of her." Sewell approached with military precision, but his eyes held the warmth of a father whose son had finally learned the lessons that mattered most. "I'm proud of you, Jasper. This is the man I raised, the one I knew was in there. Nancy joined our circle, tears flowing freely as she embraced both Vivian and me. I'm so sorry for what you endured, but I'm grateful my son found the strength to make it right. The photographer raised his camera hesitantly. Should I? Yes, Vivian said firmly, her arm around my waist and her hand finding Jasper's. Document this, the moment our family really began. As applause began slowly and built to a crescendo, I felt Maria's presence as surely as if she stood beside me. Our daughter had chosen well, not the man Jasper had been, but the man he was becoming. The band resumed playing, couples moved toward the dance floor, and somewhere in the garden's flowering trees, spring sang its eternal song of growth and second chances. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.